Hey everybody, thanks for listening to my response to the readings for Module 4, specifically on kind of gender and sexual identity. So I guess just to kind of start off, really was interested a lot in the text this week. Really enjoyed the reading on it. This is, I don't know, just really interesting to me, especially kind of going back and really reading a little bit more, particularly about first thing I want to start off with from the Evans text, talking about the different theories or different models of sexual orientation identity and kind of identity development. And really thought it was interesting, kind of looking at how each of the, the authors of the theory or theorist or model or whatever you want to call it, how similarly I saw it connect with um, race and ethnicity, which is not a revolutionary concept. I don't want to claim that I've just discovered something amazing, but thought it was really interesting as far as really seeing the progression on developing these identities. So specifically, really looking, kind of starting off with Cass's model of sexual orientation identity, really talks about these stages, these processes, these kind of steps that you would take in order to get to this identity. And really, I kind of saw it as it was really a movement towards kind of acceptance and pride of who you were. And we really saw a lot of that in the text about race or ethnicity, and that was really the push there, is really getting someone to be comfortable about who they are and not feeling this pressure to put themselves within this one group or this one community. So really interesting there. I did kind of think it was interesting to, they presented some of the challenges specifically with Cass's model, particularly just because it was so new in how society really had looked and viewed sexual orientation. Even into the 70s, viewing that, I think it was the 70s, that it was a mental illness, not just this identity, how a person could be. So interesting to see how much change has really happened within the modern time frame, but yet still there's so much more to know and to learn. And so thought it was cool how they continued, as everything does, something new comes out, improved model. And Fassinger was the next one, kind of who presented the next kind of model within the Evans text, and really he kind of helped to establish integrating sexual identity into a personal, not necessarily that you have to identify as this gay person or lesbian or whatever else, that the sexual orientation has to be the primary identity, and really recognizing that, once again, as we talk about identity development and who people are, you're not just one thing. That may be one component, one piece of it, but all of these things blend together and add together to see that. And Dugeli also really kind of brought along, further about this. It's this progress, this movement towards, and really bringing in some more diverse application. And in particular, too, he mentioned a little bit about this need to create this environment that is welcoming for those students on campus, those minority students. So having those services and creating those policies for students who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, all of the different identities that a person can have, and having those policies on campus. And that goes back into Beeman talking about the trans on campus, how many campuses there is such a hostile environment towards those people, towards transgendered people, and really mostly it all stems back from a lack of education and a lack of understanding. That many people, and particularly universities, they just don't know how to support students in those ways, particularly for those students who are transitioning from transitioning regardless of where they're at in their process. But you see that more and more, that now campuses are providing those safer spots, having those gender neutral bathrooms, by providing housing and having those environments that transgender students can be in, and not feel uncomfortable and feel welcome there. So really seeing that is such a push, as this it becomes something we are more and more educated and aware about, needing to know that. So, which also ties a little bit more into, and I really was more focused on kind of some of the sexual and gender identity, kind of talking about the Jones text about queer theory. And I thought it was really interesting how they defined it, and kind of said that it was actually better to define it as what it is not. And basically, they said really what this is boiling down to is what are these social norms on gender and sexuality, and having that understanding that everything has this social construct. And we have to put on these different filters and applications to cultural, historical, and really mention a lot about how a lot of what the initial and original research about sexual orientation had this primarily white, kind of European, or this traditional white European or white male perspective on it, and how that's really not the case. We really kind of had to open it out, and really get a better understanding and broaden it there, which definitely relates into kind of what are those societal expectations of where we are and who we should be. And I thought that was kind of a cool connection, trying to find some relationship to what we read about this week, to experiences with the AAAE. And particularly really felt the connection with the Edwards and Jones article, Putting My Man Face On, continuing on the conversation of what are those societal expectations, and thinking of my students, particularly as men on a team sport, how there's this exuding pressure to have this, to be masculine, that they have to be in a certain way because they're on a team sport, they're playing this, and really even sometimes sports in general, even regardless of whether it's a men's sport, women's sport, or whichever the team, there really is this kind of push that there is this expectation as a society, and we feel this need, as the article says, to put this mask on, to put this representation on what we think society wants us to be, and we really put ourselves in that place that we do this, and part of us getting better identified with who we are, we start to realize, like, oh, maybe this isn't really who I want to identify as, but this is who society has identified me as. So thought that was interesting to see kind of that relationship and connection there with student athletes, and so I feel that a lot of them have this pressure that they've got to act a certain way, put a mask on, but that's not necessarily the case. That's just the pressure that they feel, and part of that is them learning and identifying there. So I'll cut it off because I'm probably well over my time frame. Thanks for listening. I look forward to responding and hearing the rest of y'all's